All right, we're live.
What's
Join me
up?
right now is the fight dietitian sitting in Brisbane, Australia,
That's
Jordan
right.
Sullivan, aka Geordie. First of all, is Geordie a nickname you got when you were a young kid? How did that happen?
Oh man, that's a funny story. Thanks for having me on, by the way, bro. It's awesome. But yeah, Geordie,
No
man.
doubt.
The reason that I spell it too, Jordi. My parents tell me the stories because when I was a kid, like I couldn't write a Y, like I could only do a I at the end of my name, and yeah, that's why I got Geordie. But yeah, Geordie's a pretty common nickname to Jordan. Jordan is like kind of people like what I introduce myself to people, but it's kind of like the principal office name. Hey, like you feel like you're in trouble when people call you Jordan. So yeah, Geordie's fine, man.
All right. Well, for people that don't know, the fight dietitian, he is one of the fastest rising nutritionist dietitians, weight cutters. I don't know. There's so many different names for you do so many different things. It's hard to kind of categorize a person like you
Yeah,
into like one name. What would you call yourself?
man. Like I'm a dietitian. Like I trained. That is what I refer to myself as. Like especially here in Australia, it's a like I went to university for 4.5 years. I did an undergrad, went back and did a master's degree, and qualified as a dietitian, and then like man, it doesn't really like it doesn't bother me. Like at the end of the day, you can call me whatever you want. Like it doesn't bother me as long as we like make weight, we're performing, we're doing it safely. You can call me a baker for all I care. Like, but dietitian is the official title. Yeah.
But you are kind of like a baker, you're mixing
Yeah, I
things
guess
up and cooking it up
yeah,
and everything, right?
yeah, I suppose, yeah.
All right, well, the first thing I want to get into is the fight dietitian. How did that come
Mhm.
about?
Yeah, man. It's I've always been like super interested in like combat sports. I grew up playing like rugby, and then on like my off seasons, I would box to stay fit. So I guess like that really started it. And I always say people like I'm not sure where what it's like where you're from. I didn't even know what like mixed martial arts was until I was 18. Like I remember, like I used to play like UFC on the PlayStation, and I thought like all the submissions and everything was like a type of wrestling. Like I had no idea what it was, and I remember it was one of my best friend's 18th birthday. We went down to like a hotel, and I saw like that Anderson Silva versus Vitor Belfort fight, and I remember seeing that, and I was just so obsessed with it. I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like I was kind of finishing off rugby and starting university, and it kind of just started this whole fascination with the sport. But as you know, there's not a lot of avenues to kind of go down there. So man, like the fight dietitian really kind of started when I later on I was overseas and kind of got into introduced. I was boxing a bit more at the time, like not competitively, but training a lot, and then got into jujitsu and kind of realized that there's such a gap in fight sports nutrition. There's really like I'd get on Google or I'd look for papers or something, and there was just nothing on there, and that's when I kind of thought, hey, there's a real like gap here. Like I want to know more about it. It was just curiosity, man. Just kind of carried it through and kind of built it up to what it is today.
You mentioned sports, combat sports, and you're in the gym all the time. You're talking with the fighters. Do you hit the mats with them sometimes? Are you
Yeah,
training
yeah,
anything right
yeah,
now?
yeah. Man. It's yeah, like, and that's not always too fun. Hey, like, yeah, I train. I try to train like probably 6 days a week. Like, I have a pretty busy schedule, but I like this morning, like, I got down for like 90 minutes of wrestling, and yeah, but there's definitely a reason why I'm the nutritionist and not the professional fighter. So it's a bit painful on that end. But yeah, man, I love it. Like, I love getting on the mats and having a few rolls. Like, I love hitting the pads. Like getting hit in the head's not really my thing, so I prefer the grappling. But yeah, man, I love getting involved with it. I think anyone that's done mixed martial arts, like I used to, I guess it's a product of rugby, be a bit of a gym bro and do all that lifting. I guess like the thought of going to the gym and doing chest and tries and back and buys kind of makes you want to throw up a little in your mouth. But yeah, man, like I love training like MMA. Like it's the best type of fitness. I couldn't encourage people to do it more.
Yeah, that weightlifting is I think it's kind of like a false ego that people have in their mind when they get that little pump in their body. And then
Yeah,
when you
yeah,
go do some
anyway, like
mixed martial arts or jujitsu,
yeah, yeah. I
it's a
remember walking
reality
in.
check.
Yeah, like my first jujitsu class, I like walked in, and at the time I was probably like 8, 9 kilos heavier than what I was now. And yeah, I remember this little guy just like twisting and bending me, and I was like, what is this happening? And yeah, man, it's definitely true that you know strength doesn't always win.
No, no, not at all. You mentioned wrestling. I saw you at the Hickman Brothers wrestling seminar not too long ago. How did that go? Shout out to the Hickman Brothers.
Yeah, with Frankie and that. Yeah, I know Frank through I've obviously met him at UFC events and stuff, but we share like a partner, the guys that were running that event. Yeah, I do a bit of work with them, and like I really like what they're about and the guys who run that company. So yeah, they just invited me along to get a bit of yeah, wrestling in with that. But it was, yeah, pretty much, it was like a work thing, but yeah, it was great. It was a great conference. If anyone got to it, they'll say that too. I'm kind of hoping Frank comes out again because I want to pick his brains about a few things. So yeah, he's awesome.
All right, now let's get into the clients you have. But before we get into the clients, I wanted to talk about the testing protocol. Like when you do get a client or you get a fighter in, what tests do you put them through, and like what kind of knowledge do you need from them to put them on the right path to making the weight or to cutting down to a certain weight?
Yeah, this is I guess this is pretty much the reason like why I started the fight dietitian, I suppose, is because exactly this is that what I was looking for when I was trained as a dietitian and then when I worked, everything is methodical, right? You're working off like best practice guidelines, you're working off like set structured things to get certain results. And I guess when you get into sports nutrition and high level athletes, they're the outliers, right? So you don't really have that to fall back on. But I thought surely there's got to be something in place around here to say, okay, someone wants to know, how do I cut weight? A guideline with all the studies will come up or something. But there's really not, man. And that's kind of why I wanted to start this. And a big focus of what I do, and I love like working with the fighters. I really do love it, man. Like I live and breathe for fighting, helping these guys. But a big part of what I do is contributing to the research of that. And luckily, I've linked up with a physio down about an hour south. And what we've been focusing on this year is getting the data to develop those testing methods. What I generally do, everyone that I like to work with, I get them in to do a resting metabolic rate, which is you pretty much breathe into a machine for 20 minutes, and it'll figure out how many calories you're burning or should your body will need to use for you to function throughout the day. It'll also give you the proportion of carbs to fats that you're burning. So it without getting into too much detail, it gives you like a really good indication of how efficient your body is at using certain fuels. And then we get these guys to do a VO2 max test, and then that shows how you're actually using those fuels in exercise. And there's so many factors that can contribute to that. Like guys will eat like certain types of diets and they can change that, or certain types of training will change that. And for MMA, it's a highly explosive sport. So we're looking for certain percentages. So I get all my guys to do that as a baseline. I send them off to the doctors, get a full blood count. They're getting their thyroid checked, they're getting their testosterone done. Females, I like them to test their menstrual hormones to make sure that everything's good, because really with anything in sport, the only way that you're doing better is by monitoring, right? So I use all those things as like a baseline, and then measure them out at different periods throughout the year or throughout their camp, or depending what we're doing.
Now, after you gather all that data, right, what, is it different from like, say, a fighter that is, a 185er to a fighter that is like a 145er? Are there big differences in what you have to prepare for them?
Yeah, it depends. It really depends on the fight. Like, man, I collect data on like what they're eating, what their training schedule's like what type of training they're doing. MMA is such a cool area because it's not like any other sport. Like I have a lot of strength coaches that say like that I talk to about this and say like one MMA fighter who prefers to do a lot more wrestling than striking is going to have like markedly different like metabolic changes in their body. So like you've got to kind of gauge that. That's why doing those tests throughout is very important, because you can gauge it. But yeah, man, I'm really interested in underlying medical conditions. If they're taking any supplements, any medications, things like that. I need to know how they're eating. Like your body gets very regulated towards a certain way that they eat, and you release hormones certain ways, and then yeah, what their training's like when they're training, how long for, how intense is it, and what that looks like over a week, so I can kind of plan out, okay, like this is what we need to do to make sure you're refueled. And make sure you've refueled, but we're also losing the weight. So yeah, there's quite a bit of info I need to gather, before we start. Difference between those guys, man, is obviously like a 185 will probably be eating a lot more than a 145. Like, depends where they're dropping weight, depends what their body fat percentage is like. It really depends like how much muscle mass they have, like how efficient they are at burning certain fuels. Nutrition kind of seems very simple. Like I try to make it look simple, like eat this at this time and you'll be at this weight. But yeah, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
So what your training can affect what you have to eat? Like you said, like if you wrestle like 50% of your camp, that can affect what type of nutrition you need. I didn't know that before.
Yeah, man. This is a really good example. It's pretty broad, but this is a good example. Like, take a long distance Kenyan runner and like think of their body shape and the food like they'll be eating compared to like say a power lifter. Like, it's very different, right? Like, that powerlifting is like a very highly glycolytic activity. It's very explosive. You're using certain types of muscle fibers to do that movement. Therefore, you're moving through different energy chains in your body to make that explosive movement. But when you're just running and you're running for long distances, you're using different energy systems. Your muscle fiber changes, so the way it uses energy is different. And Louise Burke actually brought out a good paper a couple years ago showing that like keto diet is super popular. If you eat like a high fat diet, the enzymes in your muscles, that the machinery, so to speak, that burns the fuel that you're bringing in actually upregulates. So by just changing your diet, you can be better at burning this fuel. Or like if you're bringing in a lot of carbs, you become more efficient at burning that. So activity like wrestling, super explosive all the time, super explosive. You get someone that's wrestling a lot, shooting a lot, doing a lot of that. If anyone's done, say, wrestling and then gone to like a jiu-jitsu class where you're kind of just doing technique and you're flowing, and then if you don't do hard rounds after it, the energy you burn in that wrestling class is very different to that jiu-jitsu class. So you got to keep that in the back of your mind. And probably similar type of energy systems, right? Like, you're using that glycolytic system, but to the extent to what you're using that is going to be drastically different. And I guess the thing is, and this is my job, and this is why it's so good. Again, I always say, like, getting these testing parameters, because like otherwise you're really just guessing off equations. But if you get someone on a VO2 max, you can almost extrapolate and say, okay, at this point they're burning this much. Or we get a lot of guys wearing heart rate monitors, and then you can, from that data, you can pull out and say, okay, this session we burned this many calories and you were in this training zone. So I know that I need to replace this many carbs. So my job then becomes, I need to figure out how to best replace that and get it back into your body.
So when you have, let's say, for example, a Muay Thai fighter getting ready for a fight compared to a mixed martial artist, then the baseline of their preparations for their diet is completely different, because one guy is only training the stand-up aspect of the sport and the other guy is training the all-arounds, everything.
Yeah, that's right. So they're using different energy systems. And I think Muay Thai is kind of similar with boxing. It's kind of like a bit more stuck in that old school system where like they're still doing a lot of road work, a lot of running. So you need to consider that, they're using that different energy system for quite a lot. Like, every morning they'll be doing these long runs, whereas with MMA, like, there's so much focus on time on the mats, and then you're integrating strength and conditioning. So yeah, man, definitely, like, I'm not going to say they're worlds apart, but I guess when you get to the really high level guys and it, become missing weight, you can be 100 grams over and you'll miss weight. You really want to be as close as you can with those differences between them.
This might be a little bit off topic, but is there a preferable like climate for training, or a preferable climate for digestion of food? Does climate have to do anything with that?
Yeah, maybe. I'm probably not the best. I can't say I've researched it too much. There's all those a lot of studies about like training at altitude, like train high, compete low, and it builds up your your oxygen. You get better adapted to working with less oxygen, and then you come down low, and so possibly, man, like, and for sure, like, you're sweating a lot. Sorry, it's sweating a lot more in like hotter climates. So like a lot, like a test that I get some of my guys get is like a sweat test. So you can go into a lab and work out, and they'll test how much sodium you're losing or how much overall sweat. Like, I lived in Canada, up in the Rocky Mountains, man, like high altitude. in the mountains, like in -40, and that training was completely different to when, you know, I'm in Brisbane hitting heat, which is, you know, it's very different physiologically, man. Like, and what's actually going on. I'm probably not the best person to ask. There's probably someone out there that's a lot more knowledgeable. I'll try and find them and put them in contact with you.
Definitely. Now let's get into your first client. You know, your first client is like your first, you know, your first lady, I guess. You know,
Yeah,
you
your
can't
first,
forget the person, right? So, who was your first client, and you know, what was going on in that situation, and what did you learn from that whole experience?
yeah, like, man, I guess a lot of people who do this, like the first client, like it's pretty simple. Like I was my first client. Like when I experimented with weight cutting and everything myself, like I just started competing jujitsu. I remember my first comp. It was like at the time, jujitsu was illegal in Ontario, or MMA, sorry, was illegal in Ontario, and my gym put on like a combat. It was like a combat jujitsu, like underground type of thing. I don't know how they got away with it, but the weight classes were 150, 175, and 200. And I'd only just start. I think I've been training for 4 weeks or something. And I would work. I sort of bounced ideas back and forth with a boxer that I used to train with. He used to do these crazy weight cuts, and he'd ask me ideas. And but before then I'd never even done it myself. So I was like, I'm gonna do this. Like I'm gonna do it myself. But I was teetering at like 170. And I was like, there's no way I'm going up against the bigger guys coming down. So I'm going to cut. I think I ended up cutting 25 pounds for that in about 2 weeks for that comp. And man, that's it. That kind of gave me a really good understanding of appreciating two things. Like one, just because I went to university and I was a nutrition expert, or not an expert, but I had all that university, you know, that didn't translate at all into combat sports. And two, there's a huge lack of information and guidelines, like I was talking about, where people can get information to do this safely and properly. Man, I was doing crazy stuff. Like I was like running, like I was doing 3 workouts, like sweatsuit running every day. Like I restrict my calories ridiculously, like cut carbs, and as most fighters do, like I got in the bath. Like I'm very pedantic about like my bathing protocol if I have to go there, because at one stage I was trying to strip weight for this comp, and I was by myself and I was in a hot bath, way too hot. I didn't know this at the time, but it was way too hot, and I started blacking out, and I went under the bath, and then like came to and crawled myself out, and like, but my mindset was like, I've got to check my weight, and I was like, oh, I lost like a few pounds doing that, so that was okay. But yeah, man, it really highlighted to me how crazy this whole thing is, like, and how ridiculously unstructured it is, and how there's no real academic work towards it, or there's no safe guidelines. And yeah, that kind of got me searching to find people who actually do this seriously, and kind of led me to where I am today.
Who was the first athlete?
So when I launched the Fight Dietitian, the very first client that I got on was Diego Pereira, who I can't roll my R's, but he's the Black Panther. He's a fighter out of Brisbane. Yeah, he's awesome. He's the first guy that I labeled officially as like the Fight Dietitian's first client, and we worked together. This was like last year sometime, just after I started the company. I just decided, let's do it. I left the clinic I was at and went out, and yeah, it was awesome, man. Like it was a great experience. He had some kind of rough weight cuts in the past, and I was bouncing ideas back and forth, and it was a great learning curve. Like me and Diego still work together today, and like my processes are continually improving. So I think that was a great experience. Like he made weight and he got a really good win, and he's got a big fight coming up at Eternal in a few weeks. So yeah, I'm super excited for him. He's a real go-getter, man. I've never met anyone with a mindset quite like Diego. So yeah, I'm very fortunate that he let me do this with him, and it just opened up so many doors. Like, and yeah, let the Fight Dietitian kind of flourish into something bigger.
From that experience with Diego, what did you take out of it, you know, to help you in your, you know, the clients after that?
Man, there's oh man, so much. Like, so what I do with these guys is like I said, like you try to make nutrition seem very, very simple, but in reality it's not. Like I was tracking like how many calories he's eating every day, like trying to find patterns with you that I can correlate things to, like what was his macros that he was eating every day, what type of, what was his calories that he's eating, how much, if he was training, how was he feeling, like what was his stress levels when he was waking up, trying to track all that. And I guess looking back at it now, like it kind of was a bit of guesswork here and there. It's definitely a lot more refined now, especially having access to all the testing that I do now. But yeah, man, my whole process pretty much changed. So I shouldn't be saying that out loud, but don't worry, Diego, we're tracking well for this one.
Yeah, Diego, he'll be fighting at Eternal 42, right?
Yeah, on the Gold Coast. Yeah. He's
Yeah,
co-main
so
event.
I'll be in contact with Diego soon. I'll be doing a a little pre-fight interview with Diego, so look
Yeah,
out for that.
awesome. Yeah, man. I honestly believe like there's a handful of fighters I look after out of all the fighters I look after that I really truly believe. Like I believe all of them have the potential to get to the UFC, but Diego's mindset is just I don't know, it's somewhere else, bro. Like he's just and like I hooked him up with one of my strength and conditioning coaches, and he said that to me as well, bro. He's like, man, this guy is. I wish everyone was as dedicated and had this mindset. Yeah, he's next up. Man, he'll be a great chat to have on the show.
Now I want to give you my experience of weight cutting or dieting, in a short period of time. Like I had a jiu-jitsu competition a couple years ago, and I think I was going out for the 76 kilo division, which is you have to cut down to 74, right? Because with the gi is 76.
Like a heavy.
So I had to go all the way to 74. I was at 82. So with about a week and a half left, I cut down to 74 from 82. So basically what I did for a week and a half is I was training jiu-jitsu, going to the gym, running, and slowly dieting down, right? And then eventually the last maybe 5 days, I think I was eating like a couple pieces of watermelon and a little bit of water. Now, how bad is that for someone's body in the long term, do you think?
This is the thing. In the long term, no one knows. This is a big thing. And sorry, I'm gonna I guess I'd say this is like a trigger for me, I guess, is that no one really knows what this does in the long term or the short term. Like this is my biggest pet peeve with cutting weight, and pretty much why I started the Fight Dietitian is because you need to have you can get someone on weight, you can diet with them, you can go up and they'll go up on the scales and great, you've done a great job. Made on weight. Okay, let's do the exact same process again. Yeah, okay, same thing. Lost all the weight. Get back on the scales. Yeah, made weight again. Next fight. You can keep doing that, but unless you have these parameters that you're monitoring each time, at what cost are you making the weight? Like, I don't want to say too much about the research that we're publishing, but the second round of results just came out, and we got a result. I talk a lot with Mark Germain from who runs works out of John Poole's research, the Sports Institute over there in Liverpool, but he ran a similar study and he got some pretty scary results that they thought was just a once-off. And without saying too much, we've seen that in our results as well. And so these things probably are happening with every single fighter making weight, except no one's been looking at them and no one's been tracking them throughout this time. So yeah, on the outset, it looks fantastic. Yeah, I cut 5, 10, 15 kilos and made weight, but at what cost? Like we don't know. And that's my biggest thing is you need to get these blood measures. You need to get so many and track how these guys, because we don't know what the long and short and long term. And me, I'm a qualified health professional. I have a body to answer to. It's I'm not just I didn't just decide I wanted to be a nutritionist one day. I am a part of a body. If something bad happens, I have to answer to that. And most importantly, as a health I have a duty of care to these guys. So it's not just about getting them on weight, getting them on the scale and look good for the camera. That's an awesome Instagram pic. I need to figure out, okay, what's happening. And the research we're doing, man, I think when I put it out, I think I'll come back on in 12 months and we'll talk about it after it's been published. But I think it's going to really open up a lot of people's eyes. And what I really want people to do is kind of flood people into it and get more academics and other researchers to come in and start studying this more so we can get better ideas of short and long term. Okay, this is what's happening over this time. Yeah, we made weight. We got through our training, but this and this and this all came down and this went up, was bad. What do we do to still make the weight perform, but bring these back down and make this safer? So when you live the next 40, 50 years of your life after fighting, you're not paying for what you did in this little part of your life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't make sense. Yeah, it's a confusing thing right there. Is we don't know the long-term effects, we don't know the short-term effects, and I'm really curious what these studies are going to be published, man. I want to read these findings that you guys have
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it could change the game.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess like I kind of use that, and like I say that like on my Instagram a lot, like changing the game. But it's like I honestly think like there's some good guys in this area. Don't get me wrong. Like Reed Real is like a fantastic guy, and he kind of gets bagged a bit. I feel by like guys who are outside of the academic field. But Reed is like in my books, he's like the top guy because what he's doing is he's at least doing it, you know, like he's at least putting he's kind of like a big part and big motivator for me to get me doing what I'm doing now. Like he was like the pioneer and said to like the Australian Institute of Sport, we need to look at this. Like guys are doing this. Like he's a black belt himself. So he's like, guys are doing this. We need to, there's all these problems. We need to figure out why. And he kind of started this, well, it's pretty much like very few people doing it, but I feel like he was the one that really set the tone and said, okay, we need to study and figure out these in-betweens that's happening because like you said, man, it's scary that we don't know what happens to the body through this. And then it's even scarier to think what's happening down the track down here. And was that preventable? That's the big thing. Were there things that we could have done differently? So yeah, man, it's exciting. I'm very excited to get that out. And yeah, like I said, I'll come back on. We'll chat all about it once it's out there.
Definitely. It just shows you like these fighters that put themselves through that struggle, how mentally strong these guys are. Like there's that stigma that fighters are dumb, they just want to punch each other in the head, but you have to be extremely mentally strong to go through a weight cut like that.
Oh, bro, it's unreal. Like man, yeah. People always say that about fights. People say to me, they're like, "I don't understand how you work with fighters." It makes me so angry. And like, I'll say this to the world: fighters are the most humble, like peaceful, genuine people, like mentally headstrong people that you'll ever meet. Like, they are the people, despite like having a bashed up head, they're the people you want your sister, like your sister, to date and marry because like they're just the best. It's pretty hard to be a jerk when you get beat up every day. And like I think a big thing is that like anger is a secondary response to fear. Like, so if you're walking down the street and you with your bare hands you can you can dissolve pretty much every situation that can come physical. What's there to be scared of? You're very gentle, and that's the case, man. But headspace, man, these guys are crazy. Like we've done some, like I say, I preach. I'll put myself on the chopping board here. Like I preach safety in everything I do, but I've done some weight cuts where I've sat down with the fighter and said, this is not going to be good for your body. And we've done some ridiculously big weights, but and really by the books, they shouldn't have got the weight off. But up here, they get through. And like, even if I explain to them, look, man, this is going to be detrimental to your health later on, they're like, let's do it. And I've seen guys push through things, and it's phenomenal, man. I always say combat sport athletes, fighters are a level above athletes. Like there's the top of the top athletes, and then there's fighters. It's just, they're in a whole world class of their own, man.
All right, speaking of fighters, let's talk about the last big event. You've had a couple big names go through your system. Let's first talk about a local guy, Daniel Curry. He
Yeah,
just recently fought on Diamondback Fighting Championships 8, I believe.
eight, yeah.
Yeah, and he was making his first cut from 185 to 170. How
Yeah.
did you approach him, because he was making his first drop?
Yeah, so like there's a big difference too. Like Dan was awesome, man. Like Dan, I actually worked with the guy Dan fought last time. Like Almeida, like I worked with him before they fought, and Almeida came down pretty. Yeah, he had some things going on, so he was a bit heavier, so we got him down. But yeah, he lost a lot of weight coming down. And as soon as that fight was pretty much like 3 days later, Dan called me and was like, "Hey man, like he looked great at weigh-ins. He obviously looked great in there." And credit to him, man. He left probably like 8-10 weeks, or even longer, 12 weeks. I think we worked for quite a while together. And he's like, "I want to do this properly. Like, do you think that we can get down?" And I kind of looked at what he was eating, what his training was like, and like his body fat, and kind of ran the numbers. And I thought, yeah, man, like absolutely, you just got to tidy up a few things around here and work out your timing of your food that you're getting in, and really tighten everything up. And because really, like, there's a big thing in dieting that you think you're doing it really well, but it's like anything. Like I can talk about nutrition and do all this, but if I talk about like exercise or something, like I go to the gym like 6 days a week and do that that there's still lots I don't know about, or lots of things I could do better, and I could be much more efficient. Same with your nutrition. Like there was just things that he was doing really well. Like look at him, man. He looks like a Greek god. Like there's just other things he can be doing to be more efficient. And it was really easy, man. Like that was such a easy weight cut. It wasn't stressful for him. Like I think we ended up only like having to get in the bath and actually sweat out like a couple of kilos. He dieted down. He felt good, and like I think he looked pretty good in there, and he went the distance. And yeah, it was a really good process, man. But he was good because he reached out to me so far back, and we had so much time to work on these things. The scary ones are when they call you like a week out, and they're like, hey, man, I've got, 10, 15 kilos to lose in 2-3 weeks. Let's make it happen. So that's the really scary ones.
Speaking of short notice fights, you had Callum Potter.
Yeah.
He took a short notice fight, and Cal's a pretty big guy from what I've seen. He's a big lightweight, right? And he had to drop down for his UFC debut because, of course, Cal, that's what he wanted. He wanted to go to the UFC. You can't pass up that opportunity.
Yeah, and that's
the thing. What was his cut like?
Overall, it went really well. Like overall, it ticked all the boxes. Like he hit targets. All my guys, man. Like you can, when you get all this data and you get everything, you can really nerd out with it. And I can pretty much give these guys like numbers, like weights that theoretically their body should be at certain times. Cal hit every single one of them. So every point of that process went really well. When we got the fight week, he was losing the weight, and when we had to do the fluid manipulation, he responded really well, and we got it on. It's just at the end of the day, it was a lot of weight that we had to move, and I kind of said that to him. I was like, look, man, again, like we don't know what this does to your body. Like it's a lot of weight to move. Like, yes, it's doable, but the consequences aren't well known. And he kind of exactly what you just said. He said, look, man, like I've done this my whole career. It's a UFC debut. And I get that. Like I get that he's an athlete. You can't say no to that. So, and again, kudos to him for reaching out to me instead of just, Googling it and trying to find out how to do it himself. So it was a big cut, man, and I definitely don't condone people doing a big cut like that, but good on him for doing it in the best way possible that he could.
How many weeks would you recommend, for a cut the cut that he made? How many weeks would you have wanted to lose all that weight?
Year round. I say this to guys all the time. Like you should be like, you do your strength and conditioning year round, you train jiu-jitsu year round, you do wrestling year round, you do your striking year round. Why don't you look after your nutrition year round? People have this conception that like nutrition is just all dieting. Like, man, I get it. Like I diet, I cut weight to do competitions. Like I get it. Cutting weight sucks, bro. Like, not, man, like it's horrible. It's not fun. Like I get that, but you're not doing that all year round. Like there's times when you're training, say with a good strength conditioning coach, where you're doing a certain block with a certain goal where you can get a lot of calories in, and you'll notice the difference in all your lifts and your other training, because you can fuel your body really well for that training. But people always seem to think that, oh man, my nutrition is just for that last bit where I've got to get all this weight off. It's like, no, man, like you fuel your performance. It's the gas you put in the car. Like it's year round that you should be looking after it. That's ideal. That's absolute ideal. I can't say everyone does that. I preach to guys 8 to 12 weeks minimum. If like guys come to me 8 to 12 weeks, I can pretty much guarantee them it's like we're making weight, and it's going to be the easiest weight cut you've ever done. Plus you'll be performing like you've never performed before, and it'll be super smooth. Like if we do 8 to 12 weeks, but as you know, like things happen, things pop up, you get called up, it's a last minute show. You do what you can. So ideal world, 8 to 12 weeks. In perfect world, alternate universe, year round.
How many fighters did you have on that UFC? Was it 235? 234 card?
Yeah. So like the way fight week works is I work with Lockhart and Leith for the fight weeks. Like I did a bit of training with them back last year in June, and man, those guys are great. Like man, I really like George. I really like Dan. Man, in terms of hands-on experience, like I would love to get those guys and like get them in and like just pick their brains and pull data from their brains, because there's no one in this world that has the hands-on experience like those guys, man. Like I kind of went and did my training with them, and I wasn't necessarily going there to learn the nutrition, or like I was already doing like, you know, weight cuts and stuff like that. And it was more like, man, these guys have so much experience. I need to draw from that. And man, they've been great in like mentoring me and helping me to get where I need to go. And the system they use is really effective, and I'm a big fan of it. But what I do with them now is like my fight weeks, we'll work together, right? So like in total, I think we had like 10 athletes or so. And of those guys, like 3 of them were like my personal clients. So Shane Young, Kai Kara France, and Cal Potter are all my personal clients. And then the rest of them, like Lockhart, they'll reach out to Lockhart and Leith, and we'll all kind of work together and get the best result, because really that's what these guys want. They want to make weight in the safest way possible, as good as they can. So everyone kind of gets together and puts in that combined effort.
Are you putting the meals together, or do you work with a meal company?
For fight week, I plan all my guys' meals. So every meal, every bit of food that goes into my fighter's mouth, I plan for. And what makes it super easy is I have one main meal prep company that I work with here, but I work with a bunch of meal prep companies, and they're awesome. I just send the plan and say, hey, this week I need, on this day at this time, I need this guy's meal to look like this. And a lot of the time they'll do it, especially for the high level guys. Like Kai and Shane have a fantastic meal prep company that they work with, and they planned their whole 8 weeks and gave them all the food and everything. So that's great. But come fight week, yeah, we're cooking the meals and making sure that everything's where it needs to be. You know, in that type of scenario, you can't really miss a gram. Like, you need to be measuring everything when you're making weight at that level. You need to be measuring everything. So I'm pretty pedantic about it. I want to be cooking it and seeing what's in there and making sure they're eating all of it. But yeah, we cook it fight week. Outside of that, I leave it up to the fighters or get their meal prep company to do it.
So for fight week, you delivered meals to all 10 fighters?
Yeah, it was pretty hectic actually. Like
whoa, that is crazy right there. That's a lot of work.
We had help. Tyler Minton was meant to. Yeah, Tyler is very well known. Works with Lockhart and Leith. He was coming over from Brazil, and yeah, his flight got delayed, and he didn't end up getting there from Thursday. But luckily, like, there was a few other girls that have done like the training with Lockhart and Leith. That, yeah, at some point they did it, and they lived in the city, which was fantastic. So, and they were nice enough to kind of reach out and say like, hey, if you need a hand. One of them works with Jimmy Crute and does his nutrition, and yeah, she came over, and thank God, man, because cooking for 10 people is crazy. Like, I was kind of running the numbers in my head and each meal, and you're trying to figure out, okay, how much do they need to get at this time to lose this much weight? And really, like, we work out of a kitchen, so we've got to physically walk it, and having those guys there to walk the weight, man, I wouldn't have happened without them. So it was great. And then Tyler decided to show up 3/4 way through, and that definitely helped.
You know, I saw that you were working a little bit with Israel Adesanya.
Yeah,
you don't work directly with him, but you delivered his meals.
Yeah,
being around a guy like that, he doesn't look like a typical middleweight. He actually, in my opinion, he has the perfect body for fighting. You know, that Anderson Silva style body, long, slim, you know, not much fat. Without divulging too much information, you know, about him, he could probably make welterweight, right?
Man, like, I think with Izzy, the thing you got to understand with Izzy is, like, he is a 1 in a million in everything. You tell Izzy to make featherweight, he'll make featherweight. You tell him to go up to heavyweight, he'll make heavy. Like, he used to kickbox at heavyweight. Like, the thing with Izzy is that, like I was talking like with Diego, this mindset that these guys have is like, he's 1 in a million. The way he trains, he's 1 in a million. The way he cuts weight is 1 in a million. The way that he, you know, goes about his nutrition and everything, he's 1 in a million, man. He's just like, yeah, I'm very fortunate, very glad that I, you know, got to know Izzy and work with him that week. But man, he's something else. Like, especially like when we talk about like the elite, all these guys are elite. Like, they're not in the UFC by just chance, but I think Israel is kind of like the 0.1% of that top 1% type thing. He is he's something else, man. He's in every aspect of that game. He is something else.
When you cook for these fighters, do they give you a list of food that they don't want to eat, or do they just have to eat what you prepare?
Yeah, and I just shove it down and say, eat this. No. Like all my guys personally, when we start, I give them like a thing, like whatever. Like, is there any food you don't like? Is there any food you're allergic to? That's pretty important to know. Any intolerances that you have, any spices you have, especially like with fight week. Like the thing is these guys have been fighting, like Kai, for example, he's been fighting for 10 years. So he has kind of his processes. Like we work together a fair bit now. So we kind of have our own process. But prior to that, he had his processes. And you don't really want to interfere with that, right? Like, and you know, like even from what we do at like our local jiu-jitsu comps, like you don't want to mess up like your mental process and get ready. And you feel uneasy if you don't do certain things. So same with these guys, the way they eat. But at the end of the day, like they want to make the weight. That's why we're in there. There are certain foods that are better to eat. We tailor it as close as we can to them. And of course, like they want to enjoy the food. So you make it enjoyable for them. But we're making weight at the end of the day. So there's a line you need to draw.
Are you planning on, working with like Kai and Izzy and all those guys in the future, or is that not
Man, I've been
determined yet?
with me and Kai would be definitely working. Like me and Shane, we talk like a bit too often, and man, there's some big things coming for those guys. Like those City Kickbox, I work with Brad Riddell, who trains out of there. Like everyone there, and City Kickboxing is crazy. I'm talking with a few of their strength and conditioning coaches at the moment to get over there and help their other fighters that are coming up as well. Like they're just that gym, and like you talk to Eugene and he like is the mastermind behind it. But once you talk to him, you can see why. And when you hear these guys talk about fighting, the way they talk about it, and this is like all of them, Kai, Izzy, Shane, like Brad, the way they talk about fighting is like I've never heard it spoken about that way. But I guess that's why these guys are getting the results that no one's ever got, and they're just doing so well. It's man, I think you're as good as the people you surround yourself with, and that gym is just next level, man. There's a lot of good people doing a lot of good things, and I'm looking forward to keeping up work with them, definitely.
All right, let's move on to the weight cutting aspect of MMA. When you go to Thailand and you go to like Phuket, you go to those gyms out there, you always see the Thai fighters running in the hot ass sun with the sauna suit, and they're doing their weight cut like that. You guys got guys doing baths, saunas, hot tubs. There must be a bunch of other stuff that I've never seen also, but what is your protocol? Are there certain types of weight cutting methods for different types of fighters, or is it the amount you're cutting? What's going on with that?
Yeah, like originally when I met up with Lockhart and Leak, this was a big question I wanted to ask him because I'd done a bunch of crappy cuts myself, and I was like, how do you guys do it? And they kind of introduced me to like their bathing methods, and then so essentially what you want to do is like the whole idea of it is to sweat out the body and get that water out without putting too much stress on your body, right? And Lockhart like really introduced that to me of the concept of like, okay, you just get them hot in the bath and then wrap them up in the towels, and they use like, and I've really continued that. Like I've changed my protocol a bit, but essentially it's getting in the bath. You want to wait until see how long they sweat, wipe it off, and there's certain telling signs that you look at the time to know when to keep them in the bath for, and when they're how hot. The temperature of the water matters. You don't want to be like boiling them, and then what they really teach everyone, I guess now, is get them out, you wrap them up in the towels in the sauna suit, or there's the option to go to the sauna. And then my personal philosophy on it is, and I guess I've done like lots and lots and lots of them now, is again, I'll come back to like the safety thing of it. Like again, like I'm always thinking duty of care. Like, and again, like I passed out in a hot bath. So I think that plays a lot to my personal bias, not against them, but to be really pedantic about it. My philosophy is there's certain stresses that are necessary to put the body through to get that sweat response, but you need to know the risk of each one of those stresses. So when you put someone in the bath, the idea is not to make it super hot so that they're sweating. You just want to slowly raise their core temperature. It's like when you have a fever, your body temperature goes up by 0.4 of a degree, you start sweating in your sleep. That's all you've got to do in that bath. Timing of it all is, I guess, where the most variance is. People who do this probably have very different methods. Me personally, I don't think it's necessary to keep someone in a bath for very long, because all you need to do is bring up that core temperature. You just need to get it at the correct temperature for their body, bring up that core temperature just a little bit and have an internal stress response, not an external stress response where, oh crap, my skin is burning, because you don't want that. You want that nice little core temperature to come up. Then once you get that sweat response, okay, let's get out of the bath and let's keep that heat in, because your body's going to naturally try to bring down that sweat response, bring down that core body temperature, sorry, and the sweat response is the result of that. And so that, to me, physiologically makes sense when I'm ticking off all the boxes I need to tick off and make sure this is safe for everyone. That's the protocol I like to do, is like quite a short bath and then monitor them when they're in the towels, and obviously measuring like their blood pressure. I keep like a pulse oximeter on these guys to make sure that everything's good, and if you notice any drops, and there's little nuances, like, and Lockhart really nailed this home to me, is like, you don't want to like standing them up and postural hypertension and things like that. And I've come across that a few times, and I have a few physiotherapy friends that I've spoken to about best positions to put these guys in to make sure the blood pressure doesn't rise when they're laying down, when they're moving from the bath there. So it seems like, again, a really simple process, but it's like you really need to think about it. And a lot of my fighters will like say to me, how long do I need to be in the bath for? How long do I need to be in the towels for? It's like, man, I'm doing the maths on the fly. Like, I'm doing all this on the fly as we go. And I think, yeah, I really do. Like, I'll set Lockhart and Leith, man, they're probably the first guys in this whole game to kind of think about this in a methodical way. And I guess, like, I'm lucky because I got to take everything I learned for that and then put it to my own. And now there's a bunch of people kind of all doing their own little thing. But yeah, it's really methodical and quite scientific, man. A lot of fighters say that. It's like, wow, I didn't realize how much science was in this.
So the position that you're laying in on the ground in the towels, wrapped up in the towels, can affect how your body reacts?
Well, have you ever seen, like, man, when people get choked out in jiu-jitsu, like the refs always put their legs up? Like, I guess, yeah. I guess the theory behind it is like I worked clinically in a hospital for years, so I saw this all the time. Like, that I don't think does a whole lot, but mentally it does as well. But theoretically, it should move blood back down to your heart and normalize your blood pressure, right? There's other things you can do where you can kind of lay on the side and decrease the length, not the length that the blood has to travel, but the stress on your body. Like, when you're getting out of the bath, if you kind of go into a turtle position, like you go into turtle, that's like the least distance or the most stress. Like, you think of, like, if you stand up, there's like that distance there, and then you come back down, so you've covered this much distance. Whereas, like, if you stay tight when you're coming out of that bath and kind of go to a turtle, you've only moved that much. So stress on your body, that distance compared to this is a lot less. So there's a lot less chance that your blood pressure and like your stroke volume will change, or cardiac output will change, and your blood pressure will come down. So yeah, it's kind of seems it seems simple, but there's a lot to think about when you're doing it.
What's that stuff that people are always talking about that they rub on their body?
There's Abilene cream and Abilene, I think, is the other one, and wrestlers use that, and then the Sweet Sweat is the other one. Man, to be honest, like it's not bad. I don't know enough about the science of it. Like, I guess, like, I use it because I don't know enough about it if it actually does a heap. But I just know, like, at that level, you don't want to really take any chances. So I'm not gonna like sit here and say, oh, it's the best thing to make them sweat. I don't know whether it is or not. I'm not familiar with like how it's meant to actually do that. But I don't want someone like to not get the extra 200 grams off because I didn't rub this on. But I've done lots of cuts, man, where you don't use that and you still get the same result. So again, that's what studies are for. Hey, like, you put all this to testing and you figure this stuff out.
What is the optimal temperature for the water? Is it different for certain people?
I find that I personally have found that if they're very, like, the higher body fat they have, you kind of need to put it a bit hotter to get them to sweat. And like the fitter guys, kind of their body for whatever reason doesn't sweat as fast. But then again, it's how much like water do they have, and like water loading. This is a big thing that Reed has done, is he worked on water loading to get your body to sweat it out. So like you would have probably done this for your comps. Like, you drink a lot of water, and the idea is that you upregulate, you know, the hormones that are getting produced in your kidneys to make you continually urinate out. And Reed proved that in a study, albeit it was a significant difference, not a lot, but he proved and then he theorized the mechanism behind that. But really, like I said, with that stress response, with that, your body sits at 37, so you only really need it above that. I generally put the bath at about 38, 39. I think Fahrenheit, don't quote me, it's like 104, 105 or something around there. And like, again, that's like Lockhart guys have used that for ages, and like they just knew, like they just know that's, you just need to get it up. And then when I really dug in deep, it's like, oh well, it's actually like, how good is that it's just, they actually got it bang on where it's just above your body temperature. So yeah, man, it's just above that body temperature. You don't need to go any hotter than that. Again, if you go hotter than that, it's an external stress, not an internal one. So you're not sweating because your body temperature's gone up. You're sweating because it's really effing hot in this bath and your body's freaking out, and your cortisol goes through the roof and you get a cascade of problems there.
A question for, I guess, a normal person, a person that's not an athlete is, it always comes up, when I talk to people about just eating in general, is intermittent fasting. Would you recommend that for like a regular person?
Man, again, like I'm not an expert in it. Like when it comes to Gen Pop, like I'm super tunnel vision to fight for. I said this to someone the other day, like I get a lot of rowers and stuff like reach out to me. It's like, man, I couldn't even tell you how to hold that paddle thing. So like I'm the last, but Gen Pop, like, man, I've worked with a lot of them in the past, but like in terms of, it's fight sports. Like if it doesn't have anything to do with fight sports, I don't really care about it. But like there's a lot of crossover, right? So like a lot of these fighters will be doing intermittent fasting or doing the keto diet or doing what it is. I'm not too up to date. I haven't done too much research on it as of late. I can understand it from a point of view from it restricts your calories, like your overall calories. Yeah, that's a good thing. Like if you're not eating for, like 16 hours of the day and then you only eat 8, you probably physically can't get in that much calories as you can over that whole period. So in that sense, yeah, it makes sense. The hormonal response and what it does to, say, like, I don't know, your leptin response or your insulin, and I'm not too familiar with that, to be honest.
All right, the last thing I want to get into before I let you go, man, you educated me so much on this stuff. I've never actually talked to a nutritionist myself directly, so it's very eye-opening. If I wanted to learn more, what kind of literature or what books or authors should I look up? Or maybe even YouTubers, maybe there's a few guys on YouTube that have great things to, look through or view their channels or whatever. Do you have any people you can recommend?
Yeah, like, man, this is the other thing. Like I said, and I'm sure you've done it. Like you Googled when you're trying to make weight for a comp. There's not a lot that pops up. The ones I always say to people, man, is like, my first and foremost is go read Real's book. He has combat sports nutrition, and it's a very good baseline knowledge for combat athletes type of thing. It'll cover all the basics and give you a good strategy, like your low res, low fiber diet. When, like, say, if you want to reduce some weight for a jiu-jitsu or a judo comp or a same-day boxing comp, some great strategies in there. So that's like, yeah, that's Combat Sports Nutrition by Real. I refer people over to Lockhart's book as well, the weight cutting book. I think Lockhart's system's kind of been refined through like really high level athletes. So you kind of have to find like a medium in between, like him and the other books. But I really like a lot of the concepts that he talks about. He's the top dog in the game, so he's doing something right. And it's so I tell him to get read Lockhart's book. There's Performance Nutrition for Wrestlers. That's a great book by Clint, who runs the UFC PI. Again, it kind of runs over all of the baseline knowledge that you would need. In terms of literature, man, Reed has published a bit, and then there's the guys out in England who are publishing this summer, they said. But other than that, there's not a whole lot. There's a few other, I think it's like Combat Sports Food or something like that. I read it a couple of weeks ago. It's not bad, but in terms of getting really specific into like the like MMA and then jiu-jitsu and then boxing, probably reach out to a nutritionist or a dietitian and have a chat to them. They'll be more than happy. Oh, there's also nutrition for Taekwondo. There's a girl in Erica, I think her name is. She does it in somewhere in Australia. I'm not too sure, but I've never done Taekwondo. I'm not really into that. But like, if there's any Taekwondo athletes, I'm pretty sure she has a book specifically for Taekwondo athletes. So give that a read, man. That's my biggest advice to everyone is like take it all in. I think my personal philosophy is, as a scientist and as a practitioner, as a health professional, the worst thing you can be is stuck in your own ideas and let you convince yourself that you know everything. And I think that's the worst approach you can have, man. Like, I think I've been able to do the things I've been able to do because, like, I'm so curious about it, and my, like, system is always evolving, and I'm always reading different things and adding things to things. Like, every cut that I do from this person to this person to this person is getting better every time. It's getting more efficient. So that's what I say. If anyone's interested in it, just gather as much data as you can. Like, talk to as many people and start to build, like, a little system that works with your own body, because you start doing this stuff, you realize, like, and we don't need to go into, like, nutrigenetics or epigenetics. Like, there's a huge variance, individual variance in everyone. Just gather as much data as you can and be a scientist, and just never think you know it all, because there's always more to know.
One more thing.
Yeah.
Robert Whitaker.
Yeah.
Versus Israel Adesanya. How huge of a fight would that be for the Anzac?
Oh man, massive, man. I love this. Don't get me wrong. Like, I've worked with, like, a lot of great Americans, and man, I'm all about the Anzac MMA. Like, that's a big thing. Like, I want to promote it within Australia. I think we have so much untapped talent here. It's probably one of the fastest rising sports here. There's more, like, you know how everyone, probably when we were kids, everyone would do karate after school. Like, that's now jiu-jitsu, and there's, like, kids MMA classes where they wear all these cool little paddings and everything, and they learn, like, ground and pound and stuff. And man, it's such a fast rising sport, especially in Australia and New Zealand. And I think it just works so much. Like, Aussies and Kiwis have that, like, attitude. Like, you see it when they're playing rugby, like, that really tough, like, keep grinding attitude. And I think that's perfect, especially for wrestling. You know, like, wrestlers are the toughest people on earth. I think that fits very well with, like, with our sporting culture. So man, that would be massive. Like, I worked with Kelvin. He's one of Tyler's athletes, but I got to meet him in Melbourne. He's a great guy, and I think he's fantastic. But I'm kind of rooting for the Whitaker versus Izzy match, just so it can have that down here. I think it'd be huge for Aussie and Kiwi MMA.
Yeah, I believe that if Izzy does take that interim title, they're gonna bring it back to New Zealand and have a huge UFC in New Zealand. And that's probably the fight to make. They have no choice. It's like, what other fight would you make?
That's it, man. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm hoping for. I think it'd be amazing. It'd be amazing for the sport. It would just be amazing for everything. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm rooting for.
Definitely. All right, Jordi, man. I appreciate the time. I know you're super busy. You probably got people calling you right now, like, hey, what do I eat?
That's okay. That's no, man. Thanks for having me on. That's awesome. Like I said, the whole thing about this, I just want to get eyes on this and as many people interested as possible, so we can make this safer for everyone. Like, you and I both know, it's a crazy, confusing area. It's super grey. More people we have in this, the better. The more people who are, adequately qualified and reaching out. And I'll say, like, any students out there, I get a lot of students messaging. Feel free to message me. I'll happily talk to you. The more academics we can get in this field, the more research we can get, the better we'll make it for everyone.
Definitely, man. I'll definitely have you on, in 3 months, 6 months, a year, whenever, it is fitting to have you back. Because you're just rising to the top right now, man. You're just on your way. So it's always good to see somebody, elevating themselves, man. Elevating yourself is the most important part in a career. So yeah, I appreciate everything, and good luck to you on your future, man.
Thanks for having me on, John. Appreciate it, bro.